Hello, everybody, and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. My name's Sam Biccarino, and this is your Game Week 17 review show. We had 4 matches in the WSL this weekend. Obviously, there are a couple of midweek ones, but as we're recording this on Monday night, we're going to wait till next week's episode to touch on them. But we have got a League Cup final to speak about as well. Joining me on the pod today is one of the regulars and someone that, well, Izzy, you made it onto the Know Your Stat leaderboard, so you must be happy to be here.
Yeah, made it onto the leaderboard nicely omits where exactly on the leaderboard and any kind of numbers that came after my name. If anything, the leaderboard is a shame, a stain on my family. So yeah, I did actually do a bit of revision today. So I'm actually going to try this week.
You'll have to wait till tomorrow's episode to see how Izzy does and whether she rockets up the leaderboard or not. Alongside myself and Izzy, we have another one of the regulars, someone who is a mere one place above Izzy on the Know Your Stat leaderboard, Tom Maher.
Yeah, yes, Sam. I'm doing good. I'm happy with second. I'm making my peace with second because I'm not sure I'm going to catch up with Jacob anytime soon, I got to say.
You're not that far behind, but we'll come to that. We'll come to that in the next episode. Joining myself, Izzy, and Tom today, someone that we've not had on the pod for a number of months, I think since the summer, since the Man City preview episode, but the voice of the WSL. Welcome back, Ellen Ellard.
No, you're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you for having me. And I can't take any credit. I just came on for the Man City preview. I did not expect that this season would go this way for them, but I cannot take any credit for that.
I mean, every time you've come on to do a preview for a team, they've gone on to, well, it looks like win the WSL. So next year we'll get you on to preview.
Yeah.
I might just do it like a random, pick a name out the hat. We'll see who it will be. Maybe one of the promoted teams, and we'll see how much we can push.
Let's do a promoted
curse.
team.
Not a curse, is it?
Let's go for it. Curse.
maybe Arsenal every season. Yeah, how about that?
That's too much Arsenal for me. I don't want to be accused of bias. Come on now.
I'll be honest, that's too much Arsenal for me. Like I said, we're going to go through the League Cup final and the 4 games that happened this weekend. Bon Pastor can still say that she's won every domestic trophy possible so far at Chelsea. The Blues beat Man United 2-0 in the Subway Cup final at sold-out Ashton Gate. She was beat again as Olsen scored in Liverpool's 2-0 victory over fellow relegation-threatened Leicester City. Everton continued their winning run to 4 games, this time away at Spurs. Villa City was the league's best attack, playing the league's worst defence, so obviously that finished 0-0. And then Smith and Steiner stole the show as the Gunners make it 8 wins from 8 against LCL in all competitions. We'll cover the other 2 midweek games in next week's show because we're recording this on Monday night. Those 2 games obviously on Wednesday. So we're going to talk about Chelsea 2, Man United 0. Lauren James giving Chelsea the lead against her former club, capitalising on Jansen's error. Then Aggie Beaver-Jones made it 2 in the second half. Nice bit of control and a finish from a cross whipped in. Now, obviously, Ellen and Tom were both at the game, so I'm basically going to kind of hand it over to you two. Ellen, what were you were obviously commentating on the game. How was it?
Yeah, I think it was a typical Chelsea performance, wasn't it? Scoring the opener, as you say, pouncing Lauren James on that error from Dominique Jansen, and I think you could really feel just how disappointed Dominique Jansen was with the way that she conceded that goal. She set standards that are a lot higher than that. I think probably the same felt by Fallon Tullis-Joyce as well. Really shouldn't be beaten at a near post in the manner in which she did. And it was always going to be hard for Manchester United to come back from that. 54 games in a row, Chelsea have gone on to win once they've scored first. They have such an incredible record when they score early on in games. It was the first shot on target as well, that goal. So kind of felt like that was the big momentum switch. United put a whole host of attacking threats on the pitch, but none of them able to threaten. I think it may have been a different picture coming out of the second half if Vangerheim's effort went in, but she was unable to turn it home. So still the hunt for her first goal in Man United colours go on. And yeah, of course, it was such a full circle story for Aggie Beaver-Jones going back to Ashton Gate, where she scored her first senior goal. And of course, a place that's very very special to her and close to her heart, being on loan at Bristol City. So yeah, I think just it wasn't a dominant performance, I'd say, overall by Chelsea. Of course, the scoreline paints a certain picture. There were moments where Manchester United were going forward, but they just looked so disjointed. I think missing Hinata Miyazawa in midfield was a huge loss for them. Of course, she's away at the Asian Cup, and I think it's around the same kind of number. I think 54 games that they've been able to call on Hinata Miyazawa. I think there's about 59 starts in that, and then a handful of sub appearances as well. It was November 24 the last time that they went without her, and she's so underrated. I think her role in just keeping the midfield ticking and flowing, and you could just really sense that they were missing something, whether, that would be the spark that we know Ella Toone can provide, sending those accurate balls into the top corner from just outside the area. But yeah, disjointed performance, I think, from Manchester United. As much as they have reached 4 consecutive domestic cup finals now, I think they still just need more wins under their belts to get that consistency to look a bit more threatening in the big finals. They just don't quite have it there yet.
Yeah, it's obviously another one that Manchester United have not, another time that they faced Chelsea as well, and they've not come out as victors. I know that just from looking at the stats, and I caught up with this with the game today on the Women's Football Show, but it looked from the highlights quite close. I had a look at the stats. Possession was slightly in Chelsea's favour. Same match shots, 15 each. Chelsea only had one more shot on target, 5-4, that one. But Mark Skinner was not happy after the game, Tom. He was obviously quite frustrated in his post-match interview and said that Chelsea's goals were rubbish. And then just sort of paused for a bit too long and then said, and that's on us. So, yeah, it was a bit of a strange figure he was after the game.
Yeah, it was interesting. Because he said that to the TV, didn't he? And then I was in his post-match press conference, so they usually do, the head coaches will do that after they go to TV. So maybe he'd had a bit of a chance to kind of settle a little bit. I thought it was one of the more fascinating press conferences that I've been in, because he was obviously really disappointed, and Mark Skinner's quite an upbeat character, I think. And one of the things that he was really touching on, exactly what Ellen was saying there about how, just taking those chances, like how important that is. He was saying that in between the boxes, he felt that they were better with the ball, but that they'd given Chelsea 2 goals, and that Chelsea are the best at finishing half chances. I think it kind of came out wrong, to be honest, because I think he was kind of, most of what he was saying after the game was kind of complimentary of what Chelsea have that they don't. That it was like, they created chances to score, but they just couldn't do it in finals. And it was really interesting because he started talking about kind of why they don't have that composure and how he needs to figure that out in finals, like because Chelsea are able to have that composure. And I thought the game plan was quite good, actually, in a lot of ways. I thought it was really interesting to see Elizabeth Turland start in the 10, because I haven't seen that before. And Vangerheim was like playing up front. And when I saw the lineup at first, I thought Vangerheim was going to be out on the wing and maybe Jess Park would be playing in the 10, but that wasn't how it panned out. And I thought it worked quite well because Vangerheim has that ability. Mark Skinner was saying this after the game, like she has that ability to kind of spin and make a channel run and like push the defense back and push them back towards goal and open up those little pockets of space on the edge of the box. And that was kind of where United got a lot of their joy. Like Turland was able to took a few shots from the edge of the box that were quite dangerous. And, so that aspect of things were working quite well. And he was talking about how Park and Mallard were switching to opposite wings to try and make things difficult. And when you look at the game as a whole, it's not in that tactical battle that they've lost the game. They are sloppy goals. Like Lauren James does unbelievably well, fantastically well to close down and score, but it's a sloppy goal to concede. And, like from Janssen's perspective, of course. And then, the other goal, it's kind of the ball drops in the box and it's, defender should be clearing that, but, Aggie Muir-Jones shouldn't get the opportunity to tap it home like she does. And yeah, I mean, it's one win in 19 matches against Chelsea for Manchester United. And so from a United perspective, not taking those chances is seen as a really big thing. And it was interesting because having heard Mark Skinner speak so much about that, I felt like it would be interesting to ask Sonia Bonpastor what she thought. Like, how has she made a team that does have that Mark Skinner's looking for? And she said that she thought it was about finding the balance, because sometimes depending on where the team is, you don't want to be too difficult on them, or you don't want to be too demanding on them. Because if they're playing without confidence, it doesn't help. But at the same time, they need to understand Chelsea is a special club. And when they're in a training session, they're not just coming onto the pitch to have a training session. They're coming in to improve every day, to be the best version of themselves. When they're in front of goal, they're not just here to shoot. They need to shoot and they need to score. And I just thought that was so interesting, and it's such an interesting insight into her mentality. And obviously there's so many things that goes into having a team that has the composure to win in these finals, but Chelsea clearly do, and Bonpastor certainly does. She's had 6 domestic finals as a head coach. She's won all 6 and picked up 4 clean sheets along the way. And I think that says a lot about the type of manager that she is. And yeah, there is a lot of work for United to do, but I don't think it's as doom and gloom as it seems. They got to the final. It is just a case of just getting over the line, however they might be able to do that.
Yeah, I think we know from, numerous things over the last, 10-year period that Chelsea are just great at getting that over the line, great at getting the result. We've had I think you can probably pick out quite a few games from Emma Hayes or Bonpastor in charge where Chelsea don't necessarily play at their full potential, but get the job done. And at the end of the day, that's the important thing, because getting those 3 points or getting the win in the final, whatever it may be, is what makes the difference at the end of the day. Let's move on to the WSL, because there were 4 games this weekend, all on Sunday afternoon lunchtime. Let's start with Liverpool 2, Leicester 0, because I thought this was going to be the most interesting game of the weekend. It's very much, before the game started, 1 point apart, very much a relegation scrap, or relegation threatened scrap. Obviously, Liverpool come out on top. Beata Olsen was back in the starting 11 for the first time in 2026 in the league. She opened the scoring early on, and then Asmita Ale made a terrible foul, just really poor decision, gave away a penalty minutes from full time. Kerry Holland stepping up to make it 2-0. Leicester, I don't feel like they're a team we know they're not in a team in a good way, but I was looking at some stats on them, and just to sort of paint the picture, they only named 6 players on the bench. You can have up to 9, you can make 5 subs. They only named 6 and made 3 subs of the 5 available. They had slightly less possession, but only got 0.6 XG in the game. They only had 1 shot from closer than the penalty spot, so they're struggling to get into those goal-scoring positions. And the link-up for Liverpool's first goal, Beata Olsen assisted by Maher and Ellen Ellard, both of those players combined have scored more goals than Leicester this season. Izzy, Leicester are really struggling. They haven't scored more than once in a game all season. They haven't scored in their last 3 games. They haven't scored in 8 of their 16 games so far this season, including 6 of the 8 games away from home, which obviously this one was as well. What do you think needs to change? Because they've brought in Rachel Williams, they've brought in Alicia Lehman, obviously in January, but they're still struggling to get something on the score sheet.
Yeah, I kind of think this goes beyond now, like the players on the pitch. I think there's just a serious, it feels like to me, lack of motivation just across the board. I think obviously we know the club on the men's side as well is not doing great financially, and obviously given that the WSL is still in such a place where these clubs do rely on the men's side, that's obviously going to kind of trickle down to the women's side. And Rick Parcell's still quite a new manager, but I do feel like they just didn't find their feet, and then the confidence from there is just not shone through. I mean, I think they have a lot of good players that have their sort of moments of excellence, but they're the one of the only teams in WSL I don't really understand the team, like their kind of identity and their style. And I think it's kind of starting to show. I mean, it's one thing to lose loads of games, but to not actually be able to just like score or just really put kind of your front foot forward, even if you end up losing the game because someone else scores more. I think there needs to be, whether that's management, whether that's bringing extra people into the sort of coaching staff, just to kind of refine that. It feels like it's beyond recruiting, good players, because they have good players. Like, I don't think the players need to change. The players need to step up, but I think they need people around them who are kind of creating the best conditions for that. Because it's not going well for them.
Yeah, I've been to see Leicester a couple of times this season. They're sort of my most local WSL team, and there does seem to be a bit of a. It's not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily a finishing issue that much. They're not underachieving against their XG by that much. It's just that they're not getting the XG. They're not creating that many chances. They tend to normally sit 5 or 4 quite deep as well and try and hit on the counter, and you just a lot of the time aren't able to create those, not just shots on goal, but an actual real goal scoring opportunity. Ellen, obviously on the other side, this is a great win for Liverpool. It puts them 4 points clear of bottom, which is, I think, somewhere that a couple of months ago was somewhere that they were obviously languishing and looking like they might end up there, but they've recruited well in January, and where do you think they could go sort of this season and next?
Well, I think this season, I think they're safe. I think that's sort of been my feeling with Liverpool. I think probably since the start. I think they were really, really poorly hit with injuries. And I think if it came down to it, they'd still be a team that I would back against a team in the playoff with the WSL too. Obviously, their recruitment's been great. Recruitment have acted quickly as well. The players coming in, they've slotted into place, which I think, it can't be said for every team. Leah Schuler was speaking this week in the build-up to the League Cup final, saying how hard it is actually to come in as a new player in the January window. There's a lot of expectation to settle, and that's a player who's gone into a team who are obviously competing at the top, but then if you look at the pressure and the demands on the players who are trying to avoid relegation at bottom, it's the same, if not even harder. And I think the players who are already in the team have stepped up as well. The performance from Kerry Holland at the weekend, I think, was exceptional through this season. I think she's been one of the hardest workers. The effort that she puts in, regardless of where Gareth Taylor chooses to play her, I think she always steps up and gives 100%. And I was really impressed watching the game back at just how strong she continues to be. And Bjorta Olsen, I think that's, it was such a shrewd signing over summer, and she was one that didn't settle immediately at the start of the season. Gareth Taylor going back and forth who was going to start in that position going forward, whether it was going to be Maher Enderby, who obviously before the season didn't have any WSL goals, so much promise, so much talent that she had shown finding the back of the net in the League Cup and in the FA Cup, but just hadn't translated it to the WSL, and now she's flying. But I think it's 9 goals now in her last 9 starts with Bjorta Olsen, and she's just been exceptional. So, I think they're now on the right path, Liverpool. I think there was always sort of the feeling that they would emerge if Gareth Taylor had the backing in the window. And even though in December he didn't come out publicly and say that he would have the backing in January, the club have stepped up. I think they knew exactly what they needed to do in terms of the recruitment. And I'm really glad, a club that has 2 WSL titles, a club that has been, a giant in the past in the women's game, is finally putting their money where their mouth is in the same way. Well, obviously comparable with what they do in the men's game in terms of the when you scale it to the size of the women's game, but they are finally putting the investment in there, and I think they're reaping the rewards now with just how good they've been in recent weeks. It's a big upturn in form, it's a big upturn in performances, and I think, like I said, the players like Kerry Holland, who have been working hard through the early part of the season, found themselves in that bottom spot, unable to shift it, are finally now reaping the rewards for the efforts they put in right at the start.
Yeah, Kerry Holland for me is always in that bracket with, not necessarily quite at the same level, but in the same sort of bracket as like an Erin Cuthbert and a Kim Little, that if she was English, she'd have so much more praise heaped on her. It's just the fact that she's from a slightly smaller country, doesn't have as much success. She doesn't get the praise that she deserves all the time. But she is a fantastic player. Let's move on to probably potentially the most shocking result of the weekend. Spurs 1, Everton 2. Yuka Mimiki opening the scoring in this one. Zara Kramzars getting the assist on her first start for Everton in the WSL. Signe Gaupser equalised with about 15 minutes to go, but Kelly Gago got the winner late on to give the visitors the victory. Spurs actually had a bit more possession in this game, but Everton in front of goal were a lot more clinical. 8 shots on target, Spurs is 2, and 2.5 expected goals on target to 0.5 for Spurs. Izzy, this was just as you predicted.
Yes, possibly. Yeah, that's a win for me, to be honest. As anyone who's listened to Know Your Stat before knows that I don't always answer things quite correctly. But yeah, no, I think it's good for Everton. I'm quite happy. Again, for me, they're a bit like Liverpool this season, where it's like I'm happy to see them sort of starting to change their path a little bit. To be honest, I wasn't even aware, and maybe this is just me, that Gargo was back sort of playing regularly, because obviously there was a bit of kerfuffle in the January window about whether she was going to stay or not at Everton. Maybe I took my eye off the ball, but yeah, I mean, having her come back on the pitch and score is great news for them. And yeah, I think this is also a classic example of where Spurs were perhaps missing the players that have gone off to the Asian Cup. I think, you know, what we've seen from them this season, they're, especially in their defence, it didn't kind of show up as usual. They've obviously got the attacking threat that, like with the likes of Gokset, but, you know, Holt was pretty much silenced in that, and they weren't obviously able to convert their chances. So, yeah, I think this is really positive for Everton, actually, because Spurs feel like the type of team they should be sort of beating on a good day. And the fact that Spurs are doing so well is a big statement for Everton. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy for them, actually, and for myself for predicting the rest score.
It's on Instagram already from last week's. From last week's prediction. So you're never gonna. There's evidence. It was posted way before the game. It wasn't a fluke. Izzy did get it right. Obviously, this was done at the main Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, not at sort of their slightly smaller ground that they often use. Tom, I know you wanted to speak a bit on this because obviously they used it for the Chelsea game, which was sort of marketed as a big game, whereas at home to Everton, you might not necessarily expect that match to be at the main stadium.
I think it's really fascinating, actually. I mean, who knows more about a dodgy performance at your main stadium than Everton? So it really felt like this was set up for them. But I think it kind of told a bit of a story about these two sides. I think that when you're playing at the main stadium, the onus is often on you to kind of control and dictate the game. And Tottenham did that. But when you do that, I feel like both these sides prefer and probably play a little bit better when they cede the kind of control and, you know, play on the counter. And Everton did that to such great effect in this game. You know, I lost track of the amount of times Tony Payne found her way in behind Eula Blackstad and, you know, in on goal. And she could have had, you know, a couple of goals at least, really. And just kind of looking at the stats from this game compared to the reverse fixture, which Tottenham won 2-0 at Goodison, is really fascinating, you know, because on that day, Spurs had 4 big chances and Everton had none. And on Sunday, Everton had 5 big chances and Spurs had none. And in the game at Goodison, Everton had 53% possession to Spurs' 47. Today it was on Sunday it was Spurs 54 to Everton's 46. The home goalkeeper in both times made 6 saves, and the away goalkeeper made 1 or none. And then, you know, in September, the match in Everton, when they're the home side, had 57 more passes than Spurs on Sunday. And Spurs had 58 more passes than Everton on. So, like, it's just I just found that fascinating. Those like two teams that obviously really prefer to let you dictate the game, and then, you know, and that's why probably next week we'll talk about it shortly, but probably next week it'll suit Tottenham a little bit more against Man City to not have to set that tempo because City will set that for them. And I know we've got a great Goodison fact on the way as well, Ellen, if you want to pop in here.
I feel like it's not as relevant considering they are playing away once again, Everton. But yeah, I think exactly everything that you've said, Tom. I don't think enough has been spoken about just how challenging a pitch Goodison is on the whole. I've been there for plenty of Premier League games over the course of the last few years, and if you stand in the tunnel, it's so evident, or just at the mouth of the tunnel as you come out onto the pitch, the tunnel's actually set further into the ground. So you come up the stairs, and as you make your way up the stairs, you can see just how much of a slope the stadium is built on. And it was built like that for drainage reasons, to try and get the water off the pitch. But it is quite a significant camber that the pitch is on. It starts obviously at the centre circle and then drains off to the side. And it's a real stark contrast to Wharton Hall Park for so many reasons that of course, you've already touched on the podcast over the course of the last couple of months. And anyone who's watched women's football knows, obviously the stark difference between those two. But I think really interesting if you get a chance to get down to sort of the front row at Everton, or even if you get a chance to sort of go down onto the pitch side and look up from the tunnel, it is really stark, and it's really interesting to see just how steep it is. I say steep, we're not talking about mountains here, but we are, it is significant, and you can understand the impact that it has on the movement of the ball on the pitch and just how long it will take to adapt to that. I know that through the first part of the season, they were training, the training sessions for Everton women were held at Goodison on the day before games, on the Friday before games. They would go there to train just to get more experience, to try and get used to the feel of the stadium and get used to the feel of the pitch. So yeah, that's my fun Everton fact. But yeah, just to add to everything you've said, I think Imna Gabaro as well, I think you've got to give a word to her and everything she's done since coming back from her loan spell with Sevilla. Everton have won every league game since she returned. Back in the Spain squad, of course, against Ukraine as well. Scored the winning goal against London City Lionesses, if I'm right, and then provided the assist. I think it was Kelly Gago's goal that she set up. So she's made a real impact since coming back. I remember when I'm working, we will say what goals have gone in elsewhere around the grounds. And I remember getting buzzed in my ear to say that she'd scored. And I was like, oh, it's one of those names that I haven't been used to hearing in my ear when it comes to goals. And I had to, go back and have a double check about just, exactly what she'd done when she was over in Sevilla. And, she had contributed a handful of goals and assists during her time over there. And she's come back and she's making a real impact for Everton. So, hats off to her and the role that she's had since coming back into the squad.
Yeah, I think it was a real big loss for them at the start of last season. I think it was when she did her ACL. And there was such a big thing made of it, of this player that was quite new to the team at the time and quite new to the league. You don't often hear, unless they're already an international superstar, you don't often hear that much about them in the media, especially if they've just played 1 or 2 games and then gone off injured. But there's quite a lot of talk about her, so you knew that when she was going to come back that she was going to make an impact. And yeah, she's obviously had a bit of a loan spell, but since she's been back, she's been fantastic. Yeah, I think it was a real big loss for them at the start of last season. I think it was when she did her ACL, and there was such a big thing made of it, of this player that was quite new to the team at the time and quite new to the league. You don't often hear, unless they're already an international superstar, you don't often hear that much about them in the media, especially if they've just played 1 or 2 games and then gone off injured. But there's quite a lot of talk about her, so you knew that when she was going to come back that she was going to make an impact. And yeah, she's obviously had a bit of a loan spell, but since she's been back, she's been fantastic. I quite enjoyed the symmetry of it on Sunday as well. It was Yukima Miki and Zara Kramsar that actually went off for Gago and Kabaro. So it was sort of one assister to a goal scorer off for another assister and a goal scorer, which was, I think if you're a manager, you're probably going to be pretty pleased with that, especially when you needed 2 goals to win the game. Let's go on to another game that could have used some goals. Villa 0, Man City 0. Very much a tale of 2 halves. Villa on top. I wrote down in the first half, and then I was actually talking to a friend of the pod, Emily Herbert, earlier, and she was covering this game and said that it was probably 70% of the game that was in Villa's favour until sort of close to the end where City took charge. But either way, it was still 0-0. 2 goalkeepers that I'm sure would love to be in the England senior squad next summer, Kiara Keating and Ellie Roebuck. Obviously 16 shots for City, 10 for Villa, both teams getting 4 shots on target and just under 1 expected goals on target. So you would expect 1 or 2 goals in this game. Obviously with it being 0-0, it's just a good performance from both goalkeepers, I guess. Ellen, obviously Keating is in at the moment while Yamashita is out of the Asian Cup, and Yamashita has very much been the forerunner, especially since Christmas, for Man City, for Andre Yegelerts. But if Keating's in this form, do you think she's going to keep a spot when Yamashita comes back?
I think it's a tough one. I think that, the next game coming up for Manchester City against Spurs will probably be telling. We know exactly the goal threats that Spurs now have in their ranks. So I think it'd be really interesting just to see what Chiara Keating can do. You know, she'll have this game clean sheet against Aston Villa now under her belt. Yamashita, I think, she's such an exceptional goalkeeper. And I think she's a goalkeeper that doesn't always get her flowers as well. But, you know, what she does for Japan and what she has been doing quietly for Manchester City, I think it's been made very clear that she's the first choice now this season. Obviously, we've had seasons in the past with Manchester City where it hasn't been as clear. And there was even a bit of debate that I saw around from fans on whether it would be Chiara Keating who starts or whether Eartha Cummings would even be in for a shout while Yamashita was away. So, yeah, I think the next game will be a big one for Chiara Keating just to cement where she is. I don't think that's just for Manchester City. I think you'd make a great point there for England as well. Playing time, of course, was such a big thing that Serena Wiegman mentioned when talking about who she decided to bring into the squad. And on the flip side, I think just even being given the nod to go back into the squad has rejuvenated Ellie Roebuck. I think she looked like a player that was back with a smile on her face. You could see that. And that's against her former club as well. Yes, she may have come out with a point to prove, but she was playing with a smile on her face. She looked rejuvenated. And I think with so much of what we've seen from Ellie Roebuck, everything that she's gone through off the pitch, but then also going to Barcelona, not getting the minutes that she wanted there, coming back to the WSL. Actually, it might just be something like Serena Wiegman giving her a bit of a pat on the back and saying, you know what, you're doing enough. I want you back in the fold because of the experience that you have at a time where, you know, England are short of those experienced goalkeepers. She's a former England number one. I think that's just been enough. I hope it's been enough. You know, we're seeing, you know, this is one game, but I hope that's enough that she will start believing in herself, having that confidence, because you need as a goalkeeper that confidence to command the back line, and that's what she did so well. I think the one thing that I really picked out from the game when I was watching it before the League Cup final was Aston Villa have the most goals conceded in the first 15 minutes, I think, joint with London City Lionesses this season. I think it's 7 goals in the first 15 minutes, but they shut up shop really early and they made it really difficult for Manchester City. And that allowed them to then gather confidence, Aston Villa, that grew and grew and grew, I think, through the game. And it meant that by the time City were having to throw everything forward and trying to break down Villa, they just couldn't do it because the confidence had grown in that back line. And I think it'll be a similar picture looking forward to, you know, the games coming up for Aston Villa. If they prove that they can shut up shop early on, if they can get through those first 15, 20, 30 minutes, and I'm sure that's what they're being told, just to break the game down and go through those periods step by step, that it, you know, it will serve them well in the long run. I think City obviously missing Yui Hasegawa, the first time in 80 games they've been without her, is such an incredible run that she had been on. And again, who'd have thought that when she first came into the Manchester City squad those years ago to replace Kira Walsh? And she's just become so formidable. I think she's still underrated. I think she does get the nods now. I think she gets more attention now than she has done over the course of the last couple of years, but I still don't think she gets spoken about with the respect in terms of what she can achieve as a player. And I also think they were missing that extra creative depth out wide that I know Mary Fowler's only just coming back, but we know Mary Fowler can provide, and Alba Fagino as well. It just took City far too long to get started. First shot on target, 53rd minute, Rebecca Kanak. That's not the City that we've seen this season. I think it's 47 goals that they've scored. They're head and shoulders above the rest. When it comes to their statistics going forward, they're going to have an off day, right? The expectation's so high. It's their first draw of the season. I think it's just one of those things that is going to happen. And it's just how now they move on against Spurs, I think, will be the big thing. I don't think I'd want to be Spurs going into that game. We know how hungry they are as a squad. We know how hungry Andre Jeglerts is as a manager and how he demands the very best. So, yeah, I think they'll be disappointed. But if the City team this season, if you can take anything from it, is they pick themselves up and they dust themselves off very quickly.
I think you mentioned about Spurs next week. They don't have happy memories of facing Man City either. They very much got the number. You mentioned in there as well about Yui Hasegawa not being available. And Tom, you would think there's not many players in the world that you would bring Sam Coffey in to replace and it wouldn't be an upgrade, but City were missing Yui.
They were, yeah, they absolutely were. I think, Ellen's covered it really well there. I think she's just an exceptional player, and it's a pleasure to watch her at the Asia Cup as well. Like, she's doing amazing things. Japan are absolutely terrifying for anyone who's not from Japan watching in Asia. And yeah, she's just such a brilliant player. And I think it was really interesting because they really struggled, City, to kind of figure out what they wanted to do in this game. Because in the first half, I think Villa had 3 big chances and City had none. And then in the second half, City had 3 big chances and Villa had none. So they did kind of end up working it out. But I think it was a little bit concerning because even Chiara Keating had a great game. But, I still think there's those moments, like the moment she passes the ball straight to Lucia Kendall, and who has that opportunity. And, there's that great chance for Anna Patton at the near post as well. And, I think they really struggled to work without Yui Hasegawa, and they're not going to be the only team who's going to struggle without key players from Asia in the next couple of games as well.
Well, we've already spoken about Spurs and the players they're missing. Obviously, both of their centre-backs out and players like that. But I think teams knew this was coming. They don't necessarily know exactly which player is going to be selected, but you can have a pretty good idea that, Tokako, I think, already had about 20 appearances for Japan, even though she's only about 20 years old. So you can make a pretty good bet that she's going to get called up and stuff. So teams do plan ahead, and those that plan ahead a bit better tend to get better results in this time when international fixtures are ongoing at the same time. Let's go on to, the final game that we've got to cover at the moment. LCL 0, Arsenal 2. Olivia Smith just a bit sharper than Poppy Pattinson in the box to open the scoring from short range. And then Stina Blackstenius came off the bench and made it 2 with about 15 minutes to go. That was her 6th goal of the season, meaning that she is now Arsenal's outright top scorer in the WSL this season. Izzy, obviously, Stina Blackstenius she's not necessarily your standard striker up top. She doesn't get treated like a normal striker either. She's got more goals than starts this season, 6 goals from 5 starts. And 4 of those goals have come off the bench. The other 2 were in the same game away at Leicester in November. She's a bit of an enigma, isn't she?
I think in a way she's almost underrated as well. It's hard to say that any Arsenal player or sort of really top side player is underrated, but just the way she plays, it's the unpredictability that she comes with, and I don't even know if she's doing that on purpose or if that's just Stina Ball. But you just know when she comes on, something's going to happen. She's going to fall over and she's going to accidentally score. And you think back to all the big games where Arsenal have really needed something to change. It's always been her that's come on and made the difference. Like, obviously, there's the Champions League, but the League Cup, or when Arsenal were playing Man City a couple of seasons ago, and sort of they would. It was all going down to the final day. Like, she's always the person that makes that difference. And I think because she's a quiet and unassuming character, and because she's so unpredictable, she doesn't necessarily always kind of get that sort of credit just because of the type of character she is. But I actually just think she's fantastic. And I thought that, this game got a bit lethargic towards the end and they needed someone like Stina. I think the conditions were quite difficult. The ball was bobbling everywhere, and Arsenal were trying to play a load of long balls that kind of went awry in the wind and things like that. So it was a bit of a weird game just to watch as a viewer. But yeah, the moment Stina comes on, you just always know something's going to happen. And that's like what I love about her the most. And I think is one of the things that, Arsenal really need as a team, because I think they have reliable people like Russo's, but they really need that sort of element of surprise that Stina has. And yeah, I mean, it just shows in the stats now, top scorer, and she doesn't even start. So yeah, it's madness.
I was doing a bit of research on her earlier today, and I saw the just from searching on Google, there was an article from the Gooner came up that was just called Stina Clutch-Stenius, and I just thought that is absolutely the sort of player that she is. She can just get you that final result, and there's been multiple times where she's, I think, was it last season that she scored twice near the end against Man City or the season before, to sort of ruin their title chances, and scored final goals and things like that before. She's, one of those types of players that's definitely a cult hero, definitely a fan favourite, even if she doesn't start all the time. Arsenal were, I think, pretty good value for this win. They had 58% of the possession. They had 12 shots to LCL's 8. 2 shots on target, though, for both teams, I thought was quite interesting. LCL obviously not scoring with 2 shots on target, which, isn't that uncommon. But Arsenal scoring with both of theirs, meaning that Elena Lette in goal didn't make a save. But on the other side of the pitch, in Arsenal's goal, it was Annika Borber, Tom, that started, not Daphne van Domselaar. Although it was Arsenal's 4th clean sheet in a row, so Arsenal changing keepers doesn't make too much of a difference. I know, obviously, Daphne van Domselaar had a bit of an injury before. I don't actually know, and I'm asking you this, I probably should have researched this before we started the pod, but is Daphne van Domselaar still injured, or is this just a case of Annika Borber just being given the shirt ahead of her?
Yeah, so Renee Sleggers was asked this exact question after the match, and she said, Annek's been doing really well, and it was about readiness, who was most ready to perform, and our decision today was to give Annek a start. So pretty short and sweet from Renee there, but it was actually interesting because it was quite a similar answer to the one that Arjan Vierink gave during the Netherlands, in Netherlands, like pre-World Cup pressers, because Lisa Kopp started both of those games over Daphne van Domselaar. And I do think, even though they're talking about match readiness, I think she must have some kind of knock, or not be 100% ready. I think Borb's done phenomenally well, because, at the start of the season, Arsenal were clearly playing van Domselaar when she was injured or was holding some kind of injury. And she's given Sleggers the kind of confidence to choose to play her when she doesn't, not to feel like she has to rush van Domselaar back, and she's done really well. And, I remember asking Sleggers about her back in December, and, seemed like she just seemed so delighted for Anneke Borb, and that she'd stepped up, is the exact words she used, to the plate in that situation. And that's obviously something that, they struggled with last year when van Domselaar wasn't playing. And there's a lot of reasons for it. It wasn't just because van Domselaar was out of the team, but it really inhibited the way that they wanted to play at Arsenal. So, yeah, I think I can't tell you for sure, Sam. I wish I could. But my inkling is that she's carrying some kind of knock, I would imagine, and they're being a bit protective over her, I would say, at this stage. But by the same token, Annek Borb has done nothing to suggest she should be dropped. So fair play to her.
Yeah, I think at the start of the season, or earlier on in the season anyway, when van Domselaar was clearly not 100%, it did feel like Renee didn't have the confidence to put anyone else in, whether it was Borb or whether it was Naomi Williams. Obviously, she's not been put in either. But now that Borb has had to have a run in the team because of van Domselaar's injury getting worse, and, like you say, it does seem like she's still not 100%. But I guess Renee now has confidence in Borb that actually I don't need to play a 60% fit van Domselaar. Actually, I can just wait for my players to fully recover, and I've got a fantastic deputy that is still going to be able to keep me clean sheets against London City Lionesses, who, let's not forget, have quite a lot of star players up front. They have a lot of WSL goals in that front line. They have a lot of international goals in that front line. It's not like they're just a team that have, like recent seasons, the promoted team that goes straight back down. They are a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so there are the matches done for the week. We're going to move on to aerial fantasy now. Let's start off with how did we do? Because I know in our little fantasy league, I had a look, and between the four of us, myself, Izzy, Tom, and Jacob, I am comfortably doing the worst. Even the players that are coming off the bench for me, I've got 21 points so far. I do still have 5 players left to play because I've got 3 Chelsea players and 2 Man United. But Tom, you've got 50 with 1 left to play, and Izzy, you've got 53 with 2 left to play. You are the queen of fantasy this week.
It's about time. It's only been 3 seasons that I've literally been running it, and yeah, I'm having like I want to end on a high. I'm really, although just for the record, Sam told me not to bench boost, so I didn't, and there's currently like, I don't know, 25, 30 points on my bench. So if I lose the season, it's literally all Sam's fault.
But you've got Gautzer on your bench, who is coming on, because I think you had Bergstrom, who didn't play. But I told you not to bench boost. I didn't tell you to put one of the most dangerous strikers in the league last at home against bottom of the table. You can't blame me for that.
It's just, she's burnt me too many times now because I had her in right from the beginning and then she never did anything. So, yeah, I was just... And I thought, Aston Villa and City have not drawn since 2023, and literally everyone predicted 4-2. So I was like, fine, I'm sorted. No.
Oh yeah, I had Carolyn, I captained Bunny Shaw, and Rebecca Knapp got more points than both of them combined, but even with the captaincy, but never mind. Top of our league is still Stanley, their team Villanova, 38 points this game week, which I'll be honest, made me feel not quite as bad that I was only 17 off the number 1 player in our league. And Villanova, Stanley's team, is still number 1 in the world. I did actually have a look. 4 of the 4 top scorers in the world, 3 of them are in the Decoding the WSL league. So our fan club, whatever you want to call it, our league, our listeners, our viewers know their stuff.
Fan club?
Yeah, I started with fan club and I didn't like it. I felt a bit too big-headed. I didn't like that.
I'll take that. I've never had a fan club before.
Izzy's fan club is doing really well. The best game 18 score so far. Obviously, there's still a couple of games to go because we're not going to do one between this game week finishing and the next one starting. I thought I'd look at it now. It was a bit of a pain to figure out because I had to look at sort of the top teams and how much is coming off the bench, yada yada. But Habib K's team, Heinz Mean Scenes, which I quite liked, 79 points this game week with 2 to play, which I think is also the number 1 score in the world, or at least it's going to be up there. It's not going to be far off. They may be 273rd in the Decoding the WSL league, but it's a very good game week so far. Captaining Jennifer Falk, getting 18 points. Also had Galpset, Holland, Knack, Maritz, Rose Caldente, who all got goals, clean sheets, assists, a mix of any of the above, and still has Jess Park and Melvin Mallard still to play. So could end up, who knows, maybe even triple figures on a week where I'm currently on 21, but so be it. I'm glad you're doing well, Habib K. That is all we've got time for on this on this review show. There'll be an episode of Know Your Stat out tomorrow, and then a preview show out on Thursday as well. Thank you for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. As ever, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow, subscribe, etc. wherever you get your podcasts. If you're not already, go follow us on Instagram at Decoding the WSL, and also check out the YouTube channel if you're not already there, and you can come see our beautiful faces and listen to us while you view us. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Ellen. And of course, thank you to the fan club. Thank you for watching, and we'll speak to you at the next one.